This is Richard Cohen. I'm interviewing Rabbi Chaim Adelman of Habad. This is June 8th, and the interview is taking place at the Habad House in Amherst, Massachusetts. This is on behalf of the Jewish Historical Society of Western Massachusetts. Thank you very much for taking the time, Rabbi, to speak with us.
Thank you for coming.
First of all, I'd appreciate if you could give me a little bit of biography. Where did you grow up? What was your early education like? What was your introduction to Judaism, and how did you evolve as a Jew?
Sure. So my father, should rest in peace, was somewhat active Jewishly in his youth, and my mother, should live and be well, was very much traditional in her upbringing. Unfortunately, my parents separated when I was quite young, so I have very little memory of my father. My mother, however, was very convinced, and she was very intent that I would attend a Jewish school, get Jewish schooling, which I did in Canada. I was born in Montreal. I attended a Jewish school, day school, for till 6th grade. And then I moved to Toronto, my mother and myself and my family. And at that point, I didn't attend Jewish schools for the next few years. I went to a regular, what they call junior high in Canada, what is called middle school here in the U.S. And developed some friendships there. And I attended high school in Canada in Toronto. And basically was living a pretty secular lifestyle, though we were certainly aware of holidays. We knew when it was Passover, we knew when it was Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and we did our best to celebrate or to mark the day with what we knew. In any case, in high school, a friend of mine, Simcha Frankel, now lives in Los Angeles, got involved with Habad, and he brought me in. I got to know some of the rabbis there in Toronto, and then I began my process of re-entering Jewish life, and this time with more commitment in terms of practice. I was going for Shabbos to different houses and different people in the community, and I got to begin to increase my personal observance. So at the time I graduated high school, I decided that I was going to go to Israel, and I was going to go on a kibbutz. That was kind of new in those days. And the rabbi in Toronto said, "Listen, why don't you, go study in yeshiva at least part of the year, or half the year?" And I agreed, and I ended up going at that time to Or Sameach in Yerushalayim in Jerusalem, and I stayed the entire year. And at that point, I was pretty committed to my own observance. So when I came back to Canada, I talked with the rabbis there in Toronto, and they advised me to go study further. Or Sameach is not a Chabad yeshiva, so I met with the rabbi who sent me there. He was coming to Chabad house, but he wasn't himself a Chabad chassid. However, when I came back, we decided I wanted to be more involved with Chabad, so I ended up attending a Chabad yeshiva in Seattle, Washington, for a year. And the group I was with were going to go back to New York, where they were all studying originally, so I was going to go back with them after that year, which I did, and I entered the main yeshiva in New York. This was in 1977, and I studied continually from 77 in New York until 81, when I got married to my wife Yocheved, and then I studied further for another 2 years and a bit. And I took my first job in Richmond, Virginia. I was working in a community for 4 years, and then I moved to Rhode Island, Providence, and I was teaching in a school for a year, and then I came to Amherst in 1988.
What drew you to Habad in the first place?
Well, they were the ones who took me in. Honestly, I had no particular knowledge of Chabad in my youth, honestly, so they helped me out, and I felt a lot of joy in their service, and good people, and I really enjoyed it, and I felt an allegiance to it. So I pursued it, and I got to know Chabad Hasidic philosophy and Chabad lifestyle, and when I began to compare with other lifestyles, I really saw the virtues of Hasidic lifestyle in general and Chabad in particular.
Can you talk a little more about Hasidism, and in particular how Chabad fits into that category of Hasidism.
So that's a very long subject and a long topic. I'll keep it very brief. Basically, Hasidic lifestyle, Hasidic people are all part of the Orthodox Jewish community. So we're all doing more or less the same things. We're all putting on tefillin every day. We're all praying 3 times a day. We're all keeping the Shabbos and the holidays. That's all the same. The question is the emphasis on your lifestyle and where do you put your focus. So one of the major tenets, I would say, of Hasidic lifestyle is joy. And so you might find some Orthodox groups where they're more subdued in their practice. Hasidic lifestyle is much more energetic, much more lively. So that drew me in that dimension alone. And Chabad in particular, I would say, and this is a big subject, but very specifically Chabad has the idea of study of Hasidic philosophy, studying the depths of Kabbalistic Hasidic wisdom, and put in a way, in a format that any person can attain and grasp. So other Hasidic groups do not focus on that study to the extent that Chabad does, and Chabad expects that its adherents, those who study Chabad Hasidic philosophy, that will actually themselves better themselves internally, and in a sense not focus on the Rebbe so much as the Holy One, but they themselves need to become holy. So this is kind of unique in the Chabad approach. Other groups, they sort of focus on the Rebbe. The Rebbe is holy, we just sort of follow along with the Rebbe. The Rebbe will carry us. In Chabad, the Rebbe is obviously there and obviously a guide and inspiration. However, the Rebbe expects every single Chassid to maximize their potential through study and through divine service, emphasis on prayer in particular, and all aspects of Hasidic lifestyle.
When you mention the Rebbe, you're referring to Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, I assume.
Absolutely, he carries the term the Rebbe.
The Rebbe.
When you say the Rebbe, everyone knows who you mean. There's many Rebbes out there, but when you say the Rebbe, it's understood it's Menachem Mendel Schneerson.
Could you describe your personal experience with the Rebbe?
So my first experience, I was at a gathering when I just came to New York for the first time. Before I went to Israel, actually, and I was at a Fabring and a gathering amongst thousands of people that were there, and then I began to study the Rebbe's teachings and see the Rebbe's approach to life and how the Rebbe viewed our generation and what our purpose is, and I saw obviously an individual who's clearly from an exalted stature, who's here in this world, who's guiding us and leading us and directing us in the path that we have to go on. And the path is the path towards the Messianic era. And this is focused very much in Chabad teachings, and how, in fact, our generation, the Rebbe's generation, is the final generation of the exile, and that will become the first generation of the true complete redemption. So the excitement of that, it's inherent, and as soon as you get involved with Chabad, that's an obvious thing. I studied in New York and attended many of the Rebbe's gatherings. The highlight would be before my marriage. Myself and my wife entered in a private audience, and we were lucky because we were close to the end of those private audiences. The amount of people coming to the Rebbe got so big that it became an impossible. But we were the second last group of people to go in privately, and that was an exalted moment, being in the Rebbe's office. And till today, I cannot walk into that room. Well, today it's available to go into. I just cannot put a foot in there, having that experience.
It sounds like it was an emotional experience for you, or a
Yeah.
spiritual experience for both.
Absolutely, just the awe and just in the presence and hearing a holy person giving us personal blessings for our upcoming marriage and our lives in the future was something beyond any experience I've ever had.
Are there any particular teachings of the Rebbe that resonate with you today?
There's so many of them, but I will say one thing, which I find unique, perhaps, in the Chabad outlook, and that is that if you find a fellow Jew who's not conducting himself or herself in the ways of the Torah and the commandments, and so the approach among many people, even among Hasidic people, non-Chabad is to kind of reject them. They're not with the program, so to speak. They're obviously carry with them all types of different ideas and different conduct and lifestyle, which is not in line with Hasidic lifestyle. And so many groups would reject them out of hand and not invite them in. The Rebbe, however, showed us that you can find the good in everybody. And so the focus is not to focus on the negatives, but focus on the positives and separate the person's actions from who they deeply are. And these are our fundamental teachings of Chabad philosophy, is that the Jewish soul is holy. Every Jew has it, born of a Jewish mother or converted by Jewish law, and they're automatically holy, and therefore we can connect and we can tap that holy spark, so to speak, in every single one and bring that out and uplift people, even though they may not be in a perfect place. And who am I to talk? I'm not in a perfect place myself. I also have to be uplifted so that everyone's in the same position. You have to always get everybody up, focus on the holy and on the divine, and let that shine, and everything else will come into place.
Can you explain for us the meaning of the word Chabad?
Chabad is an acronym of 3 Hebrew words, Chachma, Bina, and Das, translated loosely as wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, which is basically the 3 steps of intellectual process. The first step, Chachma, is the raw idea. The second step, Bina, is development of the idea intellectually, and Das, knowledge, is the internalization of the intellect, which brings it down into the emotional realm.
As I understand, the Rebbe focused quite a bit on action. Not that he minimized in any way the importance of study, but he seemed to prioritize action in the world. How has that concept influenced you in your life?
Well, when I decided to get involved with Chabad, one of the things we do is we go on the streets and we look for Jews and offer them to do a mitzvah, which is basically action, whether it's putting on tefillin or putting up a mezuzah, or whether a woman lights Shabbos candles, or whether whatever it is that we're doing, the focus is to actually engage a person in a commandment. And the beauty of a commandment is that a commandment is essentially a bond with God. And that's achievable by anybody. It doesn't have to be a person who's been religious all their lives and observing the commandments right now. Anybody who so wishes can do one act and create a bond. In fact, the word mitzvah that we commonly translate as commandment actually comes from an Aramaic word tzavta, which means bond. So mitzvah is an actual bond with God, and the Rebbe encouraged everyone, every Jew, to bond because they have a Jewish soul, and that Jewish soul is yearning to bond with God. And one act is automatically a bond, and so that's so cherished in Chabad, and we so look forward to just catch one person, even for a moment, and they just take 30 seconds and do something, do a mitzvah, put a coin in charity box, or put on tefillin, and they've made it a bond with God. Especially when you meet a Jew who never put on tefillin in his life, a male, and you wrap a person in tefillin, it's like, wow, that's the beginning of an amazing connection that they never had before in their lives. It was just had. If I could just share, we had a couple months ago somebody who was a student. When I first came to Habad, here to Amherst, in 1988, I met a student here who was going to Umass. He eventually did a master's program, and his father is local to Amherst, lives in Amherst, and I met his father a couple of times over the years, and I was unaware until recently that he never put on tefillin in his life. His son is now observant. He's living an Orthodox lifestyle, Hasidic lifestyle, and his father never once put on tefillin in his life. And it happened that his son is now getting married in Israel, and so I met the father and I asked him, and he agreed. And I took a picture. It was like one of those moments where I say, wow, you see the Rebbe's influence, even on a person who's over 70 years old, and here he is, first time in his life, open to put on tefillin and make that bond with God. I felt so honored to be part of that.
Could you tell us a little bit about your family, how you met your wife, how large is your family, where they're located?
Sure. So I'm one of 3. I'm the youngest of 3. I have an older brother and an older sister. They both live in Toronto. I'm here in Amherst, obviously. My wife in New York. She's from England, from Manchester, and as I went to study in New York, She did the same, obviously at a women's program, and when it came time to get married, which was something which we all look forward to and expect to happen, God willing, at some point. I went out and met a number of women, and eventually I was introduced to my future wife, and we met, and obviously liked each other, and we decided that we're going to get married. I proposed, and she agreed.
Was that through a matchmaker?
The matchmaker was setting up to give us names. Like I wouldn't go, walking into the women's program and asking people, who's interested in getting married. These are things that go on behind the scenes. So the people who work there someone knew me, and then his wife knew some women in the program, and then suggested possibilities, and that's how I got to meet people. At that point on, we went out on dates. The date would be go out somewhere, we would sit and talk and discuss things and see if the chemistry was there, we're on the same page and had the same aspirations, and it would work out well together. And that's how we met. I met my wife for 6 times before we got married. And we lived in New York for 2+ years, and we went on our first job in Virginia.
Could you describe the ordination process in the Habad movement?
It's pretty much the same in any Orthodox environment. In the yeshiva, usually where the men are studying, so some yeshivas will offer an ordination program within their program. So in Habad, the Rebbe encouraged everyone to become a rabbi. So all of my friends, every one of them went through the process. And we had basically 4 tests on 4 different areas of Jewish law. We studied. We had a person to ask questions to. We had a partner that we studied with over the course of time. We felt we were ready to take a test. We would inform one of the rabbis, and then we'd put it on a list, and then we'd be going to a room with a senior rabbi, and he would go around the table, and he'd ask people there various questions about their studies. And if he felt that we did well enough on the exam, then we would pass that exam. So it was 4 stages. It was all oral. In this case, it was all oral, and we, over the course of about a year, I completed all 4 sections. Then there's a second level of ordination, which is a preparation to become a Jewish judge, a dayan, which I also got involved in. And there were 6 exams, which I completed before I left on my first job. I never pursued it to actually become a Jewish judge, but nonetheless, I did get the ordination.
What was the experience like in Richmond? How did you come to end up in Richmond, and how did that experience go for you?
So the way it worked in those days is now back in 1982 and 83. So post-marriage, there's a special school called the Kollel, where the married men study, and that's where I studied. And the rabbi who was head of this Kollel, of this school, so he was commonly approached by various Chabad rabbis around the world looking for staffing for their program. So some places were schools, and some places were outreach centers, and some places were brand new places. There were all kind of different options out there. Not that many, but there was a number of options. And so in my case, the rabbi from Virginia was looking for help in Richmond, and so he approached the rabbi there, or he asked people around, and my name came up. He probably spoke to a few people, I imagine. And I met with him, and we talked. He told me what how life was there and what he expected of a rabbi coming out working under him. I thought it was a good thing. He promised to take care of us financially, which I wasn't interested in fundraising at the time, and so I took that position. I was there for 4 years, and it was great. We were working with families primarily. I did some work on the college campus there at VCU in Richmond, but mostly worked with families and with children, different programs, holiday programs, and classes that I did over the time.
And how did you come to leave Richmond and come to the Pioneer Valley?
So from Richmond, I decided that I wanted to try teaching in a school. So I decided to leave my position in Richmond, and I was offered a position in Providence, Rhode Island, teaching. So I tried that. I didn't like it. So that year went by, and I had nowhere to go at that point in time. I wasn't going to go back to teaching, and it turned out that Amherst was open. In other words, Rabbi Israel Darren, who opened up the Chabad house here in 1974, he had at that time He had brought out four other rabbis, or two other rabbis over the course of the years that were here. For various reasons, they left. And at that time, in 1988, there was no one living here. Rabbi Darren was actually living in Springfield and coming up here just for a weekend. So he was looking for a full-time person to come in. He was actually planning on moving away into Stamford, Connecticut, and taking charge of that area. So my name came up. He approached me or called me, whatever, and we came to look at Amherst. And he also promised me he'd take care of me financially as well. And so it looked good. I never attended college in my life. I'm a high school graduate, so it's kind of a new experience for me. But we took it, and it looked like a good opportunity, and we came out to Amherst in 1988.
What exactly were your job responsibilities as the Habad rabbi in Amherst at that point?
So this particular job, as it is now as well, is primarily the college campus. Obviously, we're very close to the Umass campus, so this Chabad house is primarily a college Chabad house, and that's the primary concern that I had when I came out. And so when I came, it was meeting students, and then make sure there was programs going on for the high holidays, for Sukkot, and then during the year, classes and programs, and getting out on campus, tabling, meeting people, encouraging Jews to get involved in Judaism. And so that's the way it took hold at the early time. Obviously, maintaining the building and make sure the bills are paid. I had that responsibility as well. But primarily we were here to reach out to the students at Umass. We were the only Orthodox thing going on actually at that time. There was no Orthodox Hillel till years later. So any student who was interested in more traditional observance would come to Chabad House, and we serviced them. We had Shabbat meals, we had classes, and took care of them personally if anything came up. We're always here to help and counsel if that was needed.
Approximately how many students would you say were involved in Habad activities in that time frame?
Well, there's always the regulars, and then people who you meet, So the regulars was about, I would say, 10 to 15, who we can count on every Shabbat night, every Shabbos. Someone would come out there Friday night. They would come out. But of course, I was on campus, and I was tabling. We were meeting people, meeting other people. Some people I just met once or twice. Some people I meet come by more often. Some would come just for Passover. Some other times. So, you touch a lot of people over the course of the year. But as far as regulars that you know for sure every Friday night they're going to be at your table, there was a relatively small number.
And did that change over the years in Amherst?
It's up and down. Every year is different. Some students graduate, new students come in. My sort of view is over the time, I see that the internal connection to Judaism seems to be weakening over the course of time. It's not the same as it was when I first came. I often recall that in the early years, I put a sign up in the campus center, Pesach Seder's at Habad, and we charge $10. I'm getting phone calls and people coming, want to pay, and show up for the Seders. We'd have sometimes 60, 70, 80 people at the Seders. It was amazing times. I mean, they sit here for the whole time. I went through the whole entire Haggadah. So, for 4 or 5 hours sometimes we'd be sitting here with everybody pretty much. Then over the course of the years, I got to see people not interested anymore to stay 3, 4 or 5 hours. And, people leaving early and people not coming anymore like they were. So I kind of saw that there was a shift in the basic involvement of, in this case, the Jewish population here at Umass. We had to devise other ways to attract people to come to various programs. So, we got a little more savvy, a little more, inventive and creative in ideas. And so today what we do for Pesach, for example, we have 2 Seders going on. I lead a Seder for community people primarily, or still students who want a traditional Seder. Then we do a 90-minute Seder for students who just want to, who wouldn't go to regular Seder, and they're middle of the week, very often Pesach falls out and they got stuff going on. So 90 minutes seems to be a nice medium for them. So 8:30 they're in, 10 o'clock they're out, and they eat the matzah, they drink the 4 cups of wine, and we give them a Pesach experience. It's kind of sad compared to what we used to be, but that's what we have to do today, and hopefully people will get interested and move up in their observance.
Do you have an opinion of what caused that trend And is there some way that you can see to reverse that trend?
Well, I mean, the key word's assimilation, and that's really, what's eaten away at Jewish life. Assimilation, not just literally intermarriage, but just of ideas. Keeping Jewish ideas Jewish and not getting mixed up with secular ideas. And so, over the course of time, assimilation rates have just been skyrocketing, and it's come to the point where you have a student with a Jewish sounding last name is probably not Jewish, because the father's Jewish and the mother's probably not. And we found this, unfortunately, so many times. We're just seeing this right now. How to reverse it? Well, the Rebbe saw this already, 50 years ago. And, whereas once upon a time maybe it would have been appropriate for a rabbi to get up on a block in the middle of town and yell at people for not being observant, and maybe people would return to become more observant. Today that was not the approach anymore. And the Rebbe's approach was get out there, invite them for a Shabbos meal, have them do a mitzvah, encourage them in something positive. That's the fight against assimilation, just done in the Rebbe's approach, which is that of love, as opposed to berating somebody or insulting somebody for their lack of observance. So that's what we're doing here. We're fighting assimilation. That's what we're doing, but in the Habad way. It's not a negative. It's all about positivity. It's all about encouraging the holiness of a person to come out and to tap what's naturally there. Once it comes out, I myself, I'm also a Bolshev. I also return. And here I am today, and there's many people like me. But, it should be everybody. Unfortunately, it's a challenge, and people's assimilations, are various degrees, and some are very severe. Some people have very little identity as Jews at all, and so it's a tougher sell today, perhaps, than it once was. So creative ideas are in place today to try to get people attracted to study or to come to a program or whatever.
Do you have special programs geared toward attracting those who are sort of marginally attached to Judaism?
Yeah, I mean, my wife began a few years ago a Helping Hands program, which is basically community service. And, what she was thinking was that there's a lot of Jews out there, who don't do anything Jewishly, even though they're here at Umass and there are venues for them, but they're not involved Jewishly. However, something on a community service level, that's something which they may be interested in. That's been the case. Do we have any non-Jews coming who are interested in doing good things? We also have these Jews that otherwise you don't really see them, or they're very, very marginally involved, may come and meet you and may be interested in in getting more involved and trying to uplift them in their observance.
On that subject, could you tell us a little bit about any outreach toward the non-Jewish community, and in particular about the Noahide laws and their place in that process?
Yeah. What the Rebbe, one of his unique approaches is that, which is true all the way along, but the Jewish life has been such that we really couldn't tell non-Jews what to do for the vast majority of our history. However, nowadays things have changed. We're living in a totally free society. There's so much freedom today, and there's little persecution of Jews today. And so part of the Messianic process is that the non-Jewish world should also come to the service of God. And the Torah does provide a code of 7 laws, the Noahide code, for non-Jews. And so I keep in my pocket some cards. I meet someone on the street, someone on campus, I have a conversation, I'll hand them a card. This is the Noahide laws. This is your ticket to heaven, is the way I say it for some people. And there's a website to go to, and thank God it's burgeoning. There's different groups now, Noahide groups, and people want to marry the Noahide way. They want to live the moral lifestyle that the Noahide code demands of them, and it's beautiful to see that this is in a time now where non-Jews are interested in actually following the Torah laws.
Could you briefly describe the Noahide code? I think most people are not familiar with it.
So that's pretty basic. I mean, it's pretty close to the 10 Commandments, if you want to say. Though they're all worded in the negative, except for one. There's only out of the 7, only one is a positive, and that's the positive command to have courts to adjudicate for the other 6. But basically, they're involved in prohibition against idolatry and sexual misconduct, mistreatment of animals, not swearing falsely in God's name, and not stealing and not killing. So that's basically The rules, there's a lot of offshoots to them, but those are the basic 7 Noahide laws. And if our society would keep those laws, we'd have a better society.
You seem to have something of a staff here at the Habad House. Could you describe how the Habad House is staffed?
So basically, what we've done is I'm like full-time working for the Chabad House in terms of outreach work and the administrative side of the Chabad House. I brought the Gottlieb, Rabbi Gottlieb, Mrs. Gottlieb, 15 years ago or so, came to the Chabad House. They live in the Chabad House, so they're always present, and they are always open to host people, and they're involved in our activities. And Rabbi Gottlieb is involved largely with our fundraising, because after I came here, though I was promised to be taken care of financially, situation changed, and I had to go on my own. So we had to find ways to make sure that the Chabad House is funded properly. We had the money for our programs. So Rabbi Gottlieb came on board years ago, helping us to raise the funds and also assisting us in our programming as well. We've had a couple of rabbis here over the course of time. My daughter and son-in-law were here for a year, and other people have been here, but it hasn't worked out for them. So in the meantime, myself and my wife are the outreach people, so to speak, and the Gottliebs help us in that process as well.
Does your wife also get engaged in teaching classes?
She does. She has classes, though she's a full-time teacher right now in Springfield, so her days are pretty busy. But when she's not teaching in Springfield, she's involved in our work here at Umass.
In terms of the present student population at Umass, and specifically the Jewish population in Umass, are you aware of how many students of the total population of students affiliate Jewishly, and of those, how many today really get involved in Chabad activities?
That's a good question. I became a official chaplain at Umass, Jewish chaplain, in 1990. And part of the application process for students here at Umass is a question about your faith. It's a volunteer question. And what the university does is that those students who put down Jewish or other faiths, the list is available to the various chaplains who wish to utilize it before they even come to campus in some cases, and contact them and make them aware of their presence and services available to them when they come to UMass. So my first year, when I got the list and I became a chaplain, there were 770 names on it approximately, which means those are amount of Jews who voluntarily put themselves down as Jewish, identified themselves as Jewish. And so that was then. We now fast forward another 28 years. The list today is under 100. So what does that mean exactly? So we can ponder and we can analyze that. But I think it's indicative, personally, just my personal thought, is that it's indicative of a lack of identity that the Jewish population has at present in comparison to the way it was 28 years ago when I first got this list. And I think it's reflective in what's going on today. We meet a lot of people through our Helping Hands program, or going on campus. We have some bigger programs where we attract more people. However, they're not as involved as I've seen in the past, and I think this is true all over. This is in all of the venues, Jewish venues here at UMass. It's a standard practice, and this is what I'm seeing is a product of the assimilation that we've experienced in this country, and of course it's around the world. We're not the only country with assimilation. So it's a challenge. It's much harder today to get somebody involved. I find, personally at least, in Jewish life, at Chabad House or any venue here at UMass, it's not very simple. But nonetheless, that's our job, and we never give up on anybody. God forbid. Everyone is an entire world, as the saying goes, among the sages, and we do everything we can to get a person to even do one thing. You never know what one thing can do.
Rabbi, I'd like to ask you to describe, if you could, the some of the challenges that you have as a Habad rabbi in today's environment with some minimal engagement with Judaism that you see on the part of the students, and how you're able to cope with that situation.
Well, there's always an impression that Orthodoxy gives to people. They may feel judged by Orthodox people, especially a person that dresses like myself and looks very Orthodox. So many people might feel uncomfortable engaging with myself or with the Chabad house. However, I think once people meet myself or my wife or working here, that they can feel more comfortable, and many people have, and that's it's a challenge, but it's always been a challenge that way. It's nothing new, I don't think, to our particular time. People who are not so disposed today to observance might have more fears about an Orthodox person approaching them, but that's one of those things that we have, and we're out there, got to know you, and a friend brings a friend, and this way people might do and might actually do feel more comfortable coming and engaging.
Do you have a story to sort of illustrate that situation?
Yeah, so the story I wanted to share was a story that years ago a woman called me from Hampshire College, and she wanted to come talk with me. I don't know about what, as far as I recall at least, but she wanted to bring a friend of hers, and this friend came. It was a non-Jewish guy. She was a Jewish woman. He had tattoos and rings and the like, and whatever we spoke, we had a discussion, whatever it was. I can't remember what we talked about at the time, but nice conversation, and we parted. And it was the last that I thought I heard from them. And then years later, I'm not sure how many years later, but a number of years later, I attended a wedding of one of our alum at the Chabad house. I believe it was in New Jersey somewhere. And when I was at the wedding, a woman approached me. She asked me if I remembered her, and I didn't remember her. However, she told me, well, do you remember a woman from Hampshire College coming with a non-Jewish guy? And it struck a chord. Yeah, I do remember her, and this was her. And here she was today. She was an observant woman, and I was quite surprised. And she told me, well, she came to thank me because she apparently grew up in a more observant home, and over the time she became less observant and became more involved in secular life. And she had the impression that Orthodox people look down on non-Jews, or people don't look like the normal, quote, normal people might look, or impression of people might look. And so she when she came, she was actually testing me to see if I would react, like how I would react, in the face of a Jewish woman with a non-Jewish guy who looked clearly like he was, quote, a more hippie type person. And I never knew that. That was her intent, and it really impressed her. And that actually began her return to Judaism, and she came to thank me for it. So I realized that you never know what you do. You do one thing for somebody, and you don't even know what that particular thing is. And the Rebbe did tell us that as well, that you never know what one thing can actually do, and what it could lead to. So even though it's a one act, and you think, okay, you never see him again, but as we come to find out that even one deed can lead to an amazing transformation.
I was going to ask you a question about what you saw as your reward. You've talked about challenges, but what are your rewards as Habad Rabbi in Amherst? It sounds like you've just described one of those. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Anytime I engage a Jew is my reward. That's my life. I'm here to do this. This is what I came to do. This is what I dreamt I wanted to do. This is what I'm doing. And I'm so grateful every moment that I have a chance to do this, whether it's teaching a Torah class, or whether it's putting on tefillin on somebody, or whether it's encouraging a person attending a program, or whatever it might be. This is my reward. I know that this is what my life's all about. This is what makes it happen, and this promotes the Messianic era. There's no question that every good act is one further step towards making it happen. That's our mission. We want to bring the world to its perfection, and so we're already in the era in that regard. The world has changed so vastly in that regard, and so much good has happened in the positive side of life that we're tasting it already. So I want to be part of it, and I, thank God, am part of it. I can devote my life to it.
Can you tell us about some specific initiatives that you've undertaken while you've been at Amherst? And I'm thinking in particular of the farm, but there may be others as well you can tell us about.
That's probably the only one I would say is significant. We and I still have this idea. It's not out of my mind. It didn't work out, unfortunately. But I really wanted to create a Mashiach village, a Messianic village, so to say, and have people who are interested in living a very uplifted Jewish lifestyle, and bring in many people to participate or take part in various aspects of that life. Didn't work out, as I mentioned. They're very disappointing. However, I learned a lot from the experience, and as I said, it's not left my mind. And I'm, if I ever had the opportunity to do it again, I would do it again. But I'd have different parameters because I learned from the first time what didn't work. But that's probably the biggest project that I had. We did expand the Chabad house about 25 years ago or so, and we're now looking to purchase a property next door to give us further possibility of expansion, God willing. So in that regard, I'm looking forward to giving more opportunities and more venues for people to get involved.
Just going back to the farm that you mentioned, it seems like there's something of a trend for Jews to get back to the land. So was that part of the reasoning behind the farm initiative?
Well, it definitely fed into it. My real, one of our big drives was my work in the kosher industry. Part of the way we fundraise here in the Chabad house is that I do supervision work for companies that are involved in supervision, and mostly out of New York, New Jersey area. And at best, it's not the best. In other words, whatever we can offer, if I go into a plant once a month, you can't compare to somebody who's observant, making the food themselves on a spiritual level, on a physical level. So I came to appreciate that. Although it's an amazing system, and thank God there's kosher food out there if anybody wants to keep kosher. On the other hand, there's higher levels of food. And I kind of felt the spirituality of, growing it yourself and involving yourself with it, teaching children and adults about all the laws attendant upon production of food and farming practices. And there's so many of them in the Torah, which most people have no connection with. Most of the Orthodox Jews are living in urban environments, and they don't have any real connection with land or growth and that kind of thing. So I really wanted to provide that as well for people. That was one of my major drives. And of course it fed into the fact that many people want to go back to the land, even today as well. It's still quite a big movement of people wanting to get connected with the land, be close to living on the land is a term that was used in those days. So I want to capitalize on that. And people who are living in urban environments would love to come out for a weekend or a few days and actually, them and their kids, be involved in growing food, which is an amazing thing, and you see God's bounty right there in front of your eyes instead of picking it off the shelves in the grocery store. So there's many aspects that I wanted to incorporate. The highest of all was that having a community of people who wanted to live the most upright, highest level of Jewish lifestyle. Still, that's what in my mind the biggest drive. But actually, let's live the Messianic era right now. Let's imagine how it would look. Let's live that life. Imagine you meet a fellow Jew in the street. The first words are, "What are you studying today?" Share a thought that instead of the weather or the sports or this or that. Because what's really important is about God and Torah. That's unnatural. So imagine that was the way it was, and people prayed with intent, and they were all together, and there was a lot of respect, for the elders, and people were learning and growing. That's the vision that I had, and that's what I have at present, and I'm hoping to someday actually actualize it.
Is the main obstacle then financial?
Yeah, one of the biggest problems that we experienced was finances. Because when you have finances, you can provide for people what they need. If people want to be able to go to a restaurant, there's no restaurant here. Where are you going to go? If you want to go out for dinner with your wife or your kids, where are you going to go? Hartford, Boston, it just doesn't make any sense. So people are used to having, a pizza shop or having a falafel shop. There's nothing wrong with that. And they want to have schools. That's a major impediment. They only have a school that's local in Springfield to the 8th grade. So if you have children after the 8th grade, what do? You got to send them away. I do it, but that's not everyone's ready to do that and understand. So, but if you have resources, you can do anything you want. You can bring in teachers. You can do anything you want if you have the money. And we're in a generation today where the wealth is unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. One person could keep a whole city going today. It's just unbelievable the amount of resources one person can have. So yeah, it's out there, and no question, the money was the major obstacle at the time, and it will be in the future as well if we ever get it off the ground. It's got to be a very, very solid financial backing for it, and provide for people what they need and what they want, so they feel comfortable and feel happy. Messianic care is not about deprivation. It's about abundance, and to have everything you need, and an abundant atmosphere, materially have a spiritual abundance at the same time. They work together.
Could you talk just a little more about the spirituality of food and eating?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in Jewish life about eating. Let's just face it. They say joke. We always they try to attack us. We won. Let's eat. That kind of similar type of joke people say. And there's so many customs around eating and which courses are served first and what the courses mean. It's all based in very deep Kabbalistic traditions that we have. But the idea of making something with love, like you're involved with it yourself, there's something very deep in that. And I just feel that just on a personal level. If somebody actually works with it and they make it out of love, it's kosher, it's wholesome, it has an impact on you are what you eat. That's what traditionally known, and it's totally true. Just a reality, So if people who were observant, who cared, made the food for people who cared, and ate it with reverence and made a blessing before and after, and knew the toil and the effort to make it, I just feel it's so deep and enriching. I love to bring this kids out, from the city and let them plant wheat and see what it means go from the seed to the bread that you finally eat, and all the toil and effort. And then you make a bracha and you thank God for the food, and you've toiled with it, but you believe it's God's blessing that actually brought it from the ground. You see the miracle in it. I find that so empowering and enriching, and it's different. The different eatings, it's uplifting, and that's what I feel about what could be. I'm also buying off the shelf. I'm no different than anybody else right now. But in principle, I would love to have that ability or have that community that was interested in doing it. And that's what really one of my big drives that I had.
Just on a more personal level, do you ever feel isolated in Amherst as a Habad rabbi?
It's a good question, and I know some of my colleagues do feel isolated. But I don't feel the same way. I've never felt that way. Truth is, I grew up very independent. I had no father in the house. I had to be. My mother was working full day. I had to be independent. And I kind of it's in my nature. I feel totally myself, So, I don't feel like I have to be around people or people like myself to feel fulfilled or anything. I don't have to run anywhere. I'm fine here. I'm happy here, I'm happy to go with my friends too, but I'm happy to be here. So I don't feel this isolation. I know some of my colleagues do feel isolation. They feel, they're out of nowhere, no one's there. But we've made an atmosphere, and all the holidays are celebrated here. I never had one we didn't celebrate. Every holiday we celebrated. I can't remember one we didn't celebrate. We brought people in. We had something going on. We did something. Never was alone. And I was happy to be here, even with a few people, because if I'm dancing on Simchas Torah with one person, that's one person dancing with Torah. That's it. That's also part of we never know. I'll just share a story with one of our rest in peace Rabbi Chaim Adelman, the Rebbe's secretary in New York. He once said that there was a shliach. He had a big concert scheduled, and it was during the winter time, and a big snowstorm happened. And he goes to the hall. Everyone is there. All the people are there for the program, and only one person walks in. This big hall. Only one person walks in. So he felt so dejected, like he had planned this huge thing and it'd be a big event, and here one person walks in. So he told the person, "I'm sorry, listen, nobody showed up. Unfortunately, let's get the concert is canceled." So he reported this to the Rebbe in New York. Rabbi Chaim got saw the report or whatever, and he says to him, he made a big mistake. He said, "You can have 500 people there in a concert, but only one person was meant to be there out of the 500. So what do you care if the one person comes by himself? You should have had a concert for him." So that's what I remember that teaching, and I live with that. Even one person shows up, so that's the person supposed to be there. That's the person you talk to, that's the person you engage, that's the person who's supposed to be there. Whatever reason, we don't know what spiritual thing has to happen. We're just doing our thing, and we often don't understand exactly, what the Rebbe intended and why it's so critical for that thing to happen at that time. But we accept the Rebbe's wisdom and the Rebbe's prophetic visions as to how things are supposed to happen and what has to happen at a certain time, and we just do it. And we know that this is bringing the world to its perfection. We're going towards the Messianic era.
Do you have a relationship, do you communicate with other rabbis in the area or clergy of other religions?
We don't do that on principle. In other words, I would not seek out to create dialogue with other, leaders of other faiths. But if I'm ever, asked a question or happen to be, I'm happy to talk with anybody. But the Rebbe did not encourage that type of dialogue on principle, so I don't do it. But on occasion, I've had deep discussion with other leaders of faith.
Do you have dialogue with other rabbis in Amherst or the surrounding area?
Sure, I mean, met people. Like I said, now I have a rabbi in downtown Amherst, Rabbi Gravitsky. I have Rabbi Helfman who works in Northampton, of course, Rabbi Gottlieb, and so we on occasion get together and we discuss things or we celebrate together. So yeah, that all happens. I meet people on various levels in various ways.
Where do you go, or how do you seek energization, if that's a word, in terms of your own spiritual life?
So, everything's in the books. That's in a nutshell. And when I first went to work, my first job, I made a resolution I'm going to be keeping a good study schedule for myself. I can always have colleagues with me, obviously. So in Habad, it's well known that there's a basic study schedule of the daily Torah portion, a section of the Psalms, and a section of the Tanya, the first work of major work of the first Rebbe of Chabad. So that's basic. Rebbe added Maimonides, so that's 3 chapters of Maimonides a day. Finish that in the course of a year, and then you have other studies that I do, whether it's Talmud or 1 tractate a year, and other studies. So I keep myself engaged in Torah study on a regular basis. Not a day goes by that I'm not engaging the text, and I find the energy there. I find the instruction there. The Rebbe has printed and edited a huge amount of talks and instructions, and everything is there. All the information is there, instruction is there, guidance is all there. The sages leave their stuff in the books. So there's a famous saying that the first word of the 10 Commandments is Anochi, because I am, Lord your God. In Hebrew, the word for I is Ani. There's also the word Anochi. So the word Anochi is sort of an offshoot of Ani, of I. Explained in different areas and just why it is that way in Kabbalah. But there is a saying among the Kabbalists that the 4 letters are acronyms, which means Ana, Nafshi, Ksavis, Yahavis. I, my soul, have written and given. That means God has given himself in the Torah, and in a similar way the sages give themselves in their writing. So we study, and that's my energy. I go to New York, of course. There's a yearly convention. Actually, there's a regional one. There's a yearly one, which I attend regularly. We share ideas and hear some other insights. But as far as on a regular daily basis, the study is critical. That one studies and engages in various texts, and in Chassidic philosophy in particular, in terms of guidance.
how often do you return to 770 Eastern Parkway? And if you could also tell us a little more about the annual convention of Habad rabbis.
Yeah, so as far as my visits, I mean, I'm often, relatively often shopping there because we don't have the resources locally for certain things. I can't get the meat that I normally like to eat here, so on occasion I'm shopping in New York. My wife does the same. So plus we have family there and we have friends there, so we're there, pretty often over the course of the year. I brought many people from here to there, and I see that as kind of like a pilgrimage. We're not going to Jerusalem in terms of a temple, but it's known that the great rabbis are like going to the temple. So if you take someone to New York to 770, that's in a sense a pilgrimage. So I've made a point to offer people a day trip. We'll go in and out the same day, do some touring of Brooklyn and Crown Heights where the 770 is, and that way get a connection with the Rebbe, because ultimately the Rebbe is the head soul for every single Jew, even though the Jew might not feel the Rebbe as the head soul, but the Rebbe is still the conduit for their energy, spiritual energy, and that's what the Rebbe understands and knows what every person needs wherever they may be in the world. So 770 is a synagogue the Rebbe established, was purchased by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Joseph Yitzchak Schneerson, in 1940 when he came to America. And that became the center of Chabad. Chabad has moved over the years. It began in Russia, in Lyozhna, that was the original city, then Ladi, and then it went to Lubavitch, and then it went to Latvia, to Riga, Latvia, then it went to Poland, and then it eventually came to the U.S. So that's where the Rebbe is, and where the Rebbe's synagogue is, and the place where Torah is studied. The spiritual energy is there. So even a person walks in, doesn't necessarily feel anything, they're in the holy place regardless, and on a deep level their soul is having some sort of an arousal and a connection. So I make a point myself to go there, to pray there, and to study there whenever I have a chance to go in, and I'm traveling in, and to bring other people with me to experience. When the Rebbe was still in the physical realm, we could see it with our eyes. I would bring people in, we were giving dollars on Sundays, we would go in, we would give his blessing to people. And so that opportunity doesn't happen right now at this point in time. We wait, happen again, God willing, very shortly, but in the meantime it's not. So just going to 770 is a spiritual experience, and the Rebbe explained that according to the Talmud, the place where the Jewish leader is located is the miniature temple in the exile times, and that will become part of the actual temple. So standing in 770 is like standing in the temple. The very temple that will be the temple of the future.
Could you talk a little bit about the annual convention of rabbis also?
Thank you for reminding me. Yes, this began in the 80s, and the Rebbe encouraged that all the emissaries, the male emissaries to start, would come in to New York, and the Rebbe would address them. And so during the Shabbos get-together for bringing the gathering, the Rebbe would devote at least one talk to the emissaries, to the shluchim, and give instructions and guidance and talk about various things. And it was time to share ideas, and Rebbe wanted people to network with each other and get ideas from each other, what works for them. People working in bigger communities and smaller communities, people working in education or whatever they're doing. Rebbe wanted people to work together and try to work things, to share ideas and gain ideas. So this was encouraged. It was very small originally, maybe 40, 50 people, the first one that happened. Today it's about 3,000, 4,000 people that are coming on a yearly basis. They bring also their supporters with them today. It's quite a big affair. And so, it's a time to sort of reconnect, get back to the source and be in the holy space and get some good ideas, and then come back energized and perhaps redirected in your community. There's often challenges. Everyone has their challenges. I mean, there's no place that's devoid of challenges, and it's always good to share with somebody else. And other people do experience similar challenges, so one could learn from them as well.
Is there a subgroup of Habad rabbis who meet or talk about their dealings with students in particular?
Yeah. So Habad became more now, more compartmentalized, if I could say, and so there's now just a Habad on campus special subgroup people like myself who are on the campuses has a tremendous growth over the last few decades. Amount of campuses being serviced and students being serviced. There's a huge amount of fundraising going on to encourage students to get involved with their Chabad operations, whether with Torah study or whether with holiday observances or whatever it might be. So it's an amazing subgroup, which of course I'm a part of, and they have their own convention that occurs once a year in the summertime, where just the campus get together. And as there's a male convention, there's also for women. The shluchas, we call them, the women emissaries get together and discuss from their dimension and how they operate with theirs. So it's a lot of sharing of ideas and a lot of support coming from the central office.
On the subject of your working with the students at Umass, could you talk a little bit about how you engage the students on the subject of Israel and how that may have changed from the time that you came here in the mid-1980s to the present day?
Think back, I don't think that was a huge subject. We had many discussions with students over the years and by the Shabbos table. I don't recall that being such a big subject. The Rebbe, on the other hand, was extremely vocal about Israel on various levels, but one of the most painful ones was security, which the Rebbe literally cried many times at what was going on, how the breakdown of security and how people were put into danger and how the government was not taking forceful enough action to prevent mishaps and the like. And so I heard this when I was in New York in the years that I was there. Many times Rebbe would speak about it very painfully, mind you. But so I'm clear about my position, the Rebbe's position. And when I came here, it wasn't a big topic. I'm sure it came up over time. But now, lately, it's very much a topic because so much in the news, and especially with Gaza in particular. And so I've explained to the students on this. It's a hot topic, and give them the perspective, the Jewish perspective, historical perspective in particular. And I think many students can at least hear what I have to say. They can certainly ponder it. They're all hearing the news from various sources, and so it's confusing for everybody, I would say. But nonetheless, I get it out there. We were lucky in that we got a special grant from the Maccabee Task Force, not a Chabad operation, but they wanted to encourage students on campuses, and they've chosen certain campuses they felt that were more critical of getting these classes out there, or whatever program it was. Some of them, and they offer money to the various organizations that are doing things, whether it's Hillel or Habad or other organizations. And so Chabad was one of these recipients, and Umass was one of the campuses that they've chosen. And so we've had 2 years of it. It's one semester a year, and I give 6 classes to students, and I bring in some speakers, and I give them perspective, Jewish perspective. They get to hear it, and I think it's very important that they at least hear a different perspective on Israel, security in particular. And lifestyles that are going on over there and what's happening. So I've been very blessed to be able to share, the Rebbe's outlook on Israel. It's a very hot topic. It's a very sensitive topic, but we're right now in the midst of dangerous situation. Rockets are being launched and people are being terrorized, and it's a situation that. Very unfortunate that we're experiencing, but nonetheless, it's out there, and once we have a perspective on it, perhaps people can reassess how they're responding to what's going on.
Do you sense a detachment on the part of students today from Israel?
Well, I wouldn't say detachment. I would say there's polarization. I find a lot of Jewish students who are anti-Israel, which is very surprising to me, but I understand it given the media that's out there, who actually support the BDS movement, openly support the BDS movement, which I'm not going to get into that right now, but it's obviously very painful that we don't have a unified look among Jews. It's true here, and it's kind of true in Israel itself, unfortunately. So I find people have an opinion. Everybody has an opinion, it seems. That's something which they've heard about, and they have an opinion, whether they believe, that Palestinians deserve a state, or they believe, Israel's been too, overreactive, or they've not been giving enough, or people are very pro-Israel in the sense that, we're, it's one nation, one country, we have to be strong and not give in. So, but people are not detached. I see people are very much in it in terms of either yay or nay. There's emotion in there, and students have told me they've thought about it and they've pondered it and they came to conclusions, whether it's a two-state solution. People have definitely engaged their minds in the topic, and I found interest because people want to come, they want to hear, they want to engage, whether it's Israeli culture, whether it's the government, whether it's security, the IDF. There's interest out there, and a lot of students have gone to Israel with the Birthright program, and there's still a lot of interest in that. That people are interested in that, and it has become a springboard for people's, looking into their faith more, or their identities more. So it's all good things happening.
Also on the subject of the University of Massachusetts, there's been a lot in the press about anti-Semitism on campus. How would you assess the situation at UMass in terms of anti-Semitism? Have you had any personal experiences or talking with students about concerns about anti-Semitism on campus?
Yes, so I have not experienced myself. I've approached Palestinian groups on campus. I've gone by their tables on occasion. I've engaged them in conversation, trying to find out what's going on with them, what they perceive, and I try to present some ideas or share some ideas with them. Some students have experienced anti-Semitism. It has happened here at UMass. There's no question that it's happened, but I will say that's relatively small. This is not as bad. There have been some vocal people writing in the local, in the Umass paper, anti-Semitic comments in the articles. That's pretty much stopped over the last years, but things have happened. The graduate union voted in favor of BDS just a few years ago. So, clearly it's not gone away, and people have opinions, and they're very strong opinions. And when people had to speak up against that union, they were very vocal against them. So there's no question that there's deep-seated emotions running over here and perceptions running over here. That's probably why UMass was targeted. It's one of the schools to have this particular program. But we use it out for classes. Hillel has done classes and also some cultural programs to promote Israel. There are different ways of using the money, but I've gone with the class approach. I felt that's the more internal, the more deep discussion. I find much more fruitful in terms of getting ideas and sharing ideas. So it's out there. It's not gone away. The good news is that it's no longer government supported, and that's really, I talk about the Messianic era. Years ago, the government was doing these things. And who are you going to fight against? They're the ones who are instigating it. Today is different. It's just different. Nobody can say it openly on a government level, really, with any clout anymore. It's not appropriate. And so, because of that, thank God, the Jewish population in this country, many countries, lives in relative freedom, and we can express ourselves and be proud as Jews and do our things, openly and proudly. So, in that sense, it's positive, but still latent feelings. It's not gone away. People still have negative feelings. Anti-Semitism has become now anti-Israel. It's just another form of the same thing. Anti-Zionist, it's another form of the same thing. So these are things that exist. And thank God today we can speak, we can present. There's social media out there. We can put things online that indicate what's going on, or present different approaches to what's going on. So it's good, and the dialogue can happen.
Do you believe that there's more that UMass could do on the subject of anti-Semitism? Do you speak to the administration on that subject?
I haven't myself, but I know that Hillel has, and the rabbi there has done some good work with the chancellor. They're very supportive here, and they don't like this, any open anti-Semitic comments. When the graduate union voted for BDS, the chancellor wrote against it. So clearly, in terms of administration, they're not tolerant of that kind of stuff, which is very, very good. I'm very happy that's the way it is. And that's why the campus is relatively quiet, which is pretty positive. Other places are much worse, where there's much places my colleagues have in place where it's very, very open and very blatant. And college campuses have become a fertile ground for this. But thank God Umass seems to be relatively calm in this regard.
I have one final question, which is, do you have a vision for Habad and Amherst for the next 5 years, 10 years?
I do. I mean, I want to bring another couple here to increase our scope of work. Maybe some new ideas can be presented over here as well. I want the financial picture to get better so we have the resources to do more bold things that we haven't done in the past. And I'm very grateful that, thank God, right now we're very stable financially, but I want that to grow further so we can do more things and not to worry about the finances behind us. So that's the vision. Engage more people, on various levels. My wife's programming with Helping Hands is a good example where many people got involved, Jews and non-Jews, in positive things. And the Rabbi says that the increasing in acts of goodness and kindness is what you do to prepare yourself for the Messianic era. So that's a tangible way of doing it, and that could be increased on various levels. I want to get around other parts of campus that we don't get to see. We're close to one area of campus, but we don't really get to other part of campus so much. So that can be expanded as well, and perhaps more, more visibility in the campus with more staffing, more people to get out there and reach. Really, it's actually inner reach. You want to tap that inner potential that every person has. And that's the vision that I have right now, just to continue to expand and to open new horizons, and maybe even get a restaurant here and maybe a gym and some ways of attracting people on various levels to come and get involved with Judaism, feel comfortable with a rabbi or with the Rebbetzin or with fellow Jews, and just maintaining that identity, because assimilation is weeding away. It's crippling many people, unfortunately, and that's what the Rebbe's fight is, but it's on the positive side. Encourage people and uplift people to get more proud of themselves, and that will overcome any of their assimilationist type of thinking that have sort of crept in from the surroundings.
Rabbi, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom and your insights.
Thank you.
I very much appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.